Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to my new video where we are going to go over 10 tips for the mid lane. Now, if you're new to my channel, my name is Lofa. I do educational content, do tips videos, guide videos, also stream here on YouTube. If you want to hit that bell button and that subscribe button, you'll be notified when I go live on my streams, and you can ask me any questions there, as well as you can check out that Discord that will be linked in the pinned comments. My goal behind this video is to make you a better mid laner, as well as to give you a better understanding of the role as a whole. By the end of it, I am a bit limited with this format, so make sure to add your own mid lane tips in the comments down below. And with all that out of the way, let's get into the first tip. Alright, and getting into tip number 1, I want to give you guys a pretty good understanding of what the current meta is for the different picks you can look to play in the mid lane. Now, with the game really revolving around the Dragon Soul and the mid-game team fights, you really want to make sure that you have a champion that is quite powerful. A champion that I really would want to highlight in the mid lane that I think is exceedingly strong is the Rumble in the mid lane. He brings a great ultimate that works exceedingly well in those small objective spots. Obviously, there are a shit ton of different mid laners you can pick, but I just want you guys to recognize a current theme with the different top played champions in the mid lane currently being played in Korea, and that is that they are all extremely strong in the mid game, with the exception of Kassadin in the 14th pick. So just get a good understanding of what the meta is and how you can look to augment your picks and your champion pool for particular situations and for the current meta. And that will wrap up tip number 1. Alright, and jumping into tip 2, I want to cover something that I think is a little bit, it's lost on quite a few people that are in lower elo, and that is to roam in situations where the enemy is turtling under the tower and you are unable to really dive them. So what you want to look to do when there isn't anything to do with the lane, you have your minion wave pushed to the tower and the enemy is just CSing. You want to, at the very least, look for some deep wards. Some really good spots you can look to ward are right here, where it can check and find enemies that are going after those two buffs, or you can look to throw it in the middle and really get a lot of good vision down on the enemy jungler. This is going to provide your team with a couple of different things. First, it's going to provide you a situation where you can wait in the bush and wait for the enemy to come and really just start destroying the enemy jungler, because when you are a mid laner, you are going to be in general a lot higher of a level, and you're going to have access to items earlier than he does because he has to finish his jungle item earlier. So you will be stronger in the earlier game and in the later game. So always look for those potentials of stealing the enemy buff as well as killing the enemy jungler. This is going to put the enemy jungler behind, and it's going to take a lot of pressure off your laners because they do not have to worry about getting ganked. So always keep this in mind when you are playing in the mid lane, to look to affect the enemy jungler after pushing in your lane and just knowing that he is stuck right there CSing. And that will wrap up this tip. Okay, and getting into tip number 3, I think something that is extremely important that is lost on a lot of lower elo players in mid lane is you need to fade to the side of the jungle that your allied jungler is on, because it will allow you an easier escape route when an enemy gank comes. So say you are laning and the enemy is right over here, you got a minion wave crashing right here, and your jungler is currently on your red. You want to fade to this side in case you get ganked from the enemy jungler. On both of those sides, you have a nice and direct path you can go to feign to your jungler and cause a 2v2, as well as force them to go through fog, which sometimes is much of a deterrent for people to stop trying to collapse on you with the gank. So always be on the side of your jungler, and this is just a very simple tool that will save you quite a few deaths if your jungler is on the blue side, obviously up here. And then whenever a jungler is looking to secure a scuttle, you always want to be the first one to roam to that objective if you are able to and you have lane presence. Always look to fade to that side of the jungle to allow you a little bit more strength. I want you guys to start thinking about the closer that you are to your jungle, just think of an imaginary thread or a rope between the two of you. If you are closer to him, you're going to be stronger, and vice versa. So always make sure that you are in a decent spot in the lane where you're able to quickly just reconnect with your jungler at any point, and that will wrap up this tip. Alright, and jumping into the next tip when you are playing mid lane, and that is something that might be a little bit controversial, particularly with quite a few of the players that main other roles, and that is that when you are a mid lane champion, you are one of the predominant carries, unless you're playing something like an Ornn or a Sion or a Karma or a shielding mid laner. You really want to look to take advantage as much of the resources that are surrounding you when you are playing in the mid lane, particularly when you're in solo queue and you're having a game where your jungler is struggling quite heavily. You want to make sure that you are eating up as much CS as possible that is around you. You can take advantage of your downtimes when there's no waves around to look for jungle camps, as well as grabbing scuttle crabs when it is available. This is going to allow you to really start snowballing the games and getting really high CS scores and leads, and it's just going to enable you to carry games quite heavily. If you're one of those people that are always saying, hey, my team is so bad, my team is so bad, you need to look to start focusing only on yourself then. Try and take as much farm as possible. Try and take as many of the camps away from the jungler if he's going to be bad anyways. Try and carry the game and grab as much of that gold as possible in the different team fights. This isn't going to earn you any friends. There isn't going to be a happy jungler. You might have a few AFKs if you become this extremely greedy play style, but you will be able to start carrying more games when you have more resources. The number one easiest way to carry lower elo games is when you just beat people over the head with a huge sack of gold and having a lot more items than the enemy. So heavily focus on CSing and eating up as many camps as possible, and that will wrap up this tip. Alright, and getting into the next tip, I want to talk about something that I think is extremely important, and that is developing a champion pool that works for you. These are my stats for last season, where I was able to get up to, I think, around Diamond 2 Elo, and I really was relying on an easy-to-execute champion with a pretty easy champion pool, where I had one safe blind pick, I had two really strong counter picks that I could pick in certain situations, and then I had a nice tanky champion I could pick in different situations, as well as being able to cover both AD and AP in different situations. So you want to make sure that you have a flexible but easy to execute champion pool. I say my mid lane champion pool that I really heavily tried to carry with was Cassiopeia, Mordekaiser, Veigar, and Nocturne. So I had a safe blind pick in what I was doing with Nocturne and Mordekaiser, because people would never guess that those were the mid laners, and they would be exceedingly effective in that role of surprising people, as well as the AD of Nocturne, the AP of Veigar, and the late game hyper carry of Cassiopeia. So I covered a lot of different bases, and I want to heavily encourage you guys to really check out your champion pool. Is it an easy to execute champion pool? Are you trying to play too many hard to execute champions like I might have been trying to make Ryze work or Alawi work last season? Those are champions that are exceedingly hard to execute, when I maybe should have stuck with things that were a little bit more simpler and a little bit more in my wheelhouse. It is very important that you have a great understanding of your champion's skill set when you are going into the mid lane, because that is what really attracts a lot of players that are quite good on a micro level, is the mid lane, because they like the 1v1 type dueling situation in the early game. So make sure that your skills are up to par, and that will wrap up this tip. Alright, and jumping into the next tip, I'm just going to show you guys a really quick website I like using quite often. That's called ProBuilds. It gives you a live feed of what currently people are playing and how they are building it. But this is one thing that I want to cover that I think is quite important for people that are looking to change up their champion pool quite a bit, and that is, do not play champions just because your favorite streamer or because one of your favorite players at the LCS played it in that lane. You can always see this when there's a big off-meta pick that does well in the LCS, like a couple of days after in solo queue, there's a bunch of people trying to replicate that success. So maybe, your favorite YouTuber or streamer is Yasuo, and you want to play Yasuo a bunch because you see him playing and pulling off really crazy things with that. This is going to be it's going to put you in a really hard situation. You want to try and really refine your skills with things like maybe Annie or Veigar's super simple, Ziggs super simple, Vel'Koz super simple, Lux is super simple. There are a bunch of champions you can do when you are stuck in the lower elos. You do not want to be one of those players that's like, oh, what are pros playing right now in mid lane? And you check this out and it's like Pyke, Senna, LeBlanc, Aatrox. Lucian, Yasuo, LeBlanc, just stuff that is going to be exceedingly hard to execute on. So make sure that when you are developing your champion pool, you are being reasonable and actually try to be as unbiased as possible with your current skill and what champions you are actually capable of making work. And that will wrap up this tip. All right, and one other thing that I really want to talk about that I think is quite important for mid laners to understand is that you really need a bit of build diversity when you are playing in different situations. When you are playing, I recently started picking up one of my champions from last season that I'm starting to carry on quite a bit, and that is Mordekaiser. And as you can see, I really have a big diversity of different items that I look to pick up in different situations. I'm going to give you guys a couple of different examples and how you can look to augment your builds with different items for different situations. First up, I was doing exceedingly well in this game, so I decided to pick up something like a Nashor's that was going to provide me with a lot of CDR and great dueling potential against a lot of frontliners that were going to show up. I would have never built Nashor's if I was even or behind, because it is a little bit of a win more item. Next up, building things like Proto Belt here can be exceedingly effective when you have a really high value backliner that you need to chase down, and this really provided me with quite a bit of chase down when I was looking to get on their backline of the Vayne. Next up, when I was doing kind of okay, mediocre, I was doing kind of going like a one-on-one KDA, but I had a insanely fed ADC and a very strong jungler hyper carry, so we had a Knight's Vow for each one of those situations. I went to a hyper end of being very supportive in the mid lane, but you can look to think a little bit outside of the box when you aren't the main reason why you are winning the team fights, and you just want to augment who is doing exceedingly well in those games. So always make sure that you are switching up kind of your item builds depending on how the different games are going. There are certain champions that do rely on a super core kit, but with most champions you can rely on different types of item builds for different types of situations. And that will wrap up this tip. All right, and getting into the next tip, I want to talk about something that I think is extremely important, and I know that a lot of people struggle with this, and it really tilts them quite heavily. You start seeing people in the higher elos, in the top like 0.0001% of the player base, and they have a relatively low amount of games played to get to this extremely high point. So you start thinking, oh, I have as many games as this, I've played as many games as this guy, why have I not even gotten close to his elo? You really need to start focusing a lot less on your elo, and you need to start focusing a lot more on every single game and how you can look to improve. Stop focusing on, oh, I'm gold 4, I'm gonna lose, if I lose one more game I'm going to get demoted. Who cares if you get demoted? It's so early in the season and you just need to focus on getting better. Start every game with a thought of like, what do I need to do in this game to improve? Who cares if I win 20? Who cares if I lose 12? Who cares if I lose 20? It's gonna be exceedingly important to just focus on what is important, and that is not the numbers, it is the overall how you are doing, and if you are improving as a player or if you are going backwards because you are tilting and you're getting worried that, oh, I'm going to lose that gold rank, oh, I'm going to lose that platinum rank, oh, I'm going to lose that diamond rank. Focus on yourself and do not focus on wins, losses, do not focus on LP changes, and it will serve you quite well. And that will wrap up this tip. All right, and getting into the next tip, I want to talk about keeping on top of the meta and what is extremely important. I have two great examples of what I'm really struggling with and what I need to start working on more quite a bit with my champion pool, and that is starting to become more flexible and learning what is new and OP at the moment. This was a mid Soraka game where I was playing against a Rumble. She is a great counter to that Rumble pick and really was able to carry the game quite heavily. Next up, I have a champion that is of the past, and that is Urgot. This was the first champion I think that I reached Diamond 3 with, and I really have it's a special place in my heart with my Urgot, but I have about a 30 or 40% win rate with it, very low. I'm able to do exceedingly well in lane phase. I usually have a pretty strong KDA. I'm able to perform well, but I'm not able to carry team fights, so I need to stop picking this in different situations. So I was like, oh, we need some AD. We need some tanky AD in the mid lane, huh? We should play some Urgot. No. I need to start kind of filtering that out of my play and start adding new things, as boring as it sounds, of taking out Urgot AD mid and putting in a Soraka. That is just what you want to do if you want to start growing with the game and starting understanding, hey, why does this pick work over this other pick? Why is this more effective in this current meta than the other meta? You don't want to be one of those people that are just extremely stuck in the past and what's worked for you in the past. You want to find what works for you now, what can work for you in this meta, as this is just a constantly changing meta. And with these new season changes of bringing in the dragons, it's just been really a huge mix-up and a change-up for what's going on. The reason why I've been playing a shitload of Mordekaiser recently is because it provides such an amazing amount of objective control, where I'm able to ult out the enemy jungler and prevent him from smiting dragons and barons, and I'm able to really control the team fights quite heavily with the Rylai's build. So that's why I've been playing a lot of him, and I've been seeing a decent amount of success on that. So try and find your own little niche that works in this current meta, and you will see a lot more success. And that will wrap up this tip. All right, and getting into the final tip, I want you guys to start identifying what your champions are looking to do in different situations and how to most effectively use them. If you are playing an assassin, you have to understand that it is your job to destroy those backline champions. If you're playing something like Fizz, you need to take out the highest value squishy target champion, and that is how you're going to carry games. If you're playing something like a fighter in the mid lane, you want to understand that you're providing a good front line for your team, as well as providing a decent amount of damage in the front line. If you are playing something like a strong mage, you need to look to control certain team fights, look for picks with your CC, and really just pump out as much damage as possible. If you're playing something that is a little bit more of a mid-game champion, you need to identify, hey, I need to make something happen in this particular part. I need to start really snowballing my games quite heavily when I am in this particular situation. Or maybe you're playing some sort of late game carry. You really need to start focusing on, oh, I need to get as much as possible CS. I'm playing Orianna. I need those late game team fights where I'm able to hit plenty of people with the ball and have as much AP as possible to destroy as many people as possible. So start by just going on a notepad. Really simple. Go on a notepad and write down every single champion in your champion pool, and then identify what your win how you win games on that particular champion. What are your win conditions on that champion? And then what you are doing to work towards those in every single game. What are some common things that you are struggling with, and what are some things that you're doing that are really good, and just start getting a better understanding of your champion pool as a whole for that, because then you can start looking at what your allied champions are, what are they picking, and does that work with your certain champion picks that you are doing in the team fights. So that is my final tip for the mid lane, guys. If you have any questions, you can hit me up in the comments down below. And as always, take it easy.